If you cared about Medicare fraud or Medicaid fraud, you would kill Rick Scott. You wouldn't make Rick Scott, former governor of Florida, Rick Scott. You wouldn't make him the current, what is his current office?
Today is the day that ends in Y, so influencers are casually threatening violence against politicians again. We're going to break all this down and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across our politics, our media, and the internet, all from an independent perspective. Up first, like I mentioned, we got to talk about another major influencer engaging in some pretty unhinged and borderline violent rhetoric. This time, the left-wing streaming star, Twitch superstar over on that big streaming platform, and also here on YouTube, a massively popular presence, Hasan Piker, a very far left, self-described socialist who just said something that honestly kind of shocked me because I knew he was crazy, but I didn't know it was quite this bad. This came during a discussion of potential cuts, and I'll explain they're not really cuts, but cuts to Medicaid, the government health insurance program, being discussed by Republicans. Here was Hasan Piker's take on that. Take a listen.
No, look, the White House has made a commitment. The president said over and over and over, we're not going to touch Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. We've made the same commitment. Now, that said, what we are going to do is go into those programs and carve out the fraud, waste, and abuse and find efficiencies. Couple of examples. You know, there's about $50 billion estimated that are lost every year in Medicaid just in fraud alone.
That fraud is not coming from individuals, it's coming from providers. They're not tackling providers. They're not actually going after like false billing. They are trying to cut recipients, okay? It is not happening at the point of recipients. If you cared about Medicare fraud or Medicaid fraud, you would kill Rick Scott, okay? You wouldn't make Rick Scott, former governor of Florida, Rick Scott. You wouldn't make him the current, what is his current office? What is he? He's the Richard Lynn Scott is an American attorney, businessman, politician, Navy veteran, serving as the senior United States Senator from Florida, a seat he has held since 2019. And also, I believe this past election cycle, he was literally the f***ing head of the, what was it, like the Senate committee or something? Like the Republican fundraising initiatives. The reason why I'm saying if you cared about Medicare or Medicaid fraud, you would kill Rick Scott is because, and not make him a prominent part of the Republican Party, is because he, to this day, is still also known as committing the largest Medicare fraud in U.S. history.
Not him repeating it. He didn't just say it once. He doubled down on it. Now, he didn't directly say, like, someone should harm Senator Rick Scott, but to just repeatedly suggest killing him because of allegations of fraud is insane. It's unhinged. You don't just casually discuss murdering people in political commentary, or at least you're certainly not supposed to. And that's certainly not supposed to be allowed on Twitch. But with Hasan, there seems to be quite the double standard about their terms of service, which are very strictly enforced against other creators. But he seems to get away with a whole lot with very little consequences. And look, there's so much here because you probably shouldn't, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say this, you probably shouldn't be calling for somebody to be killed if you don't even know what office they are elected to. Hasan had to Google, is he a senator? Was he a governor? Oh, he was the head of the NRSC. That's what he was referring to. The fundraising arm for Senate campaigns for the Republican Party. Like, you don't even know enough about this dude to know that he's currently a senator without having to Google it, and you're calling for his death online. That's insane. That's unhinged beyond belief. A new low. Look, there are so many politicians on the left and right I can't stand. I would never dream of saying this. Like, it's not normal to wish violence on people or to be so casual and so flippant about people being killed because of things you think they did wrong. And to be clear, he's referencing a controversy from decades ago where the company that Rick Scott was the CEO of got in trouble for Medicare fraud and had to pay billions of dollars in fines and all sorts of things that went down with that. But I don't know enough about that one way or another to say, like, how culpable was Rick Scott. He did admit to some mistakes for all of that, but to say anyone should be executed over that or killed over that is unhinged when it was resolved already and the company paid fines and was punished accordingly. And it just doesn't make the point that he thinks it makes. Like originally they were talking about Medicaid, which is a different program for Medicare, which he then brought up Medicare fraud done by a Republican. Oh, okay. So your point is therefore it's bad to cut a program. And by the way, guys, I want to be clear. When we're talking about cutting Medicaid spending, they're actually talking about increasing it by less than planned. Yes, that is what is considered a cut in Washington, where there's a projected amount that under the status quo it will increase, and they're suggesting increasing it at a lower rate. There are no cuts, babe. Cuts to government spending in DC are barely ever a thing. So they keep talking about Medicaid cuts. They're talking about increasing the spending by less than they had planned to increase it, even though it's already been ballooning out of control and our country is running out of money and running up a crazy national debt. So the cuts, are the cuts in the room with us? I can't find any. And it's wild to have such an unhinged reaction to somebody discussing, slight trims to increased Medicaid spending, as if Medicaid doesn't have plenty of room to cut. This is a program that was supposed to be for single mothers of multiple children, for the disabled, for the truly indigent, but now has been expanded to just give government taxpayer-funded health insurance to millions of able-bodied adults. It's also been twisted by particularly blue states to just become kind of a free-for-all cash grab from the federal government. As the Wall Street Journal reports, the Biden administration gave states waivers to spend federal Medicaid dollars on non-medical purposes, including food, homeless housing, and personal transportation for beneficiaries. HHS is only supposed to grant such waivers if they don't increase the federal deficit, but the Biden HHS ignored this rule. Nearly half of the states have received federal permission to spend Medicaid dollars on housing, and it doesn't have for food. What are federal low-income housing vouchers and food stamps for again? Good question. Biden's HHS even blessed California's plan to spend federal Medicaid dollars on, quote, activity stipends for art and music lessons for children and club sports. Oregon is tapping Medicaid to pay for cooking classes, air conditioners, and mini refrigerators. Some Republican states have joined this all-you-can-spend Medicaid buffet. So Republicans are talking about cracking down on fraud and increasing Medicaid spending potentially by less than planned. All about a program that, however you feel about it, has expanded far beyond its original purpose and become a hot mess with plenty to trim from, to say the very least. And your response is to start floating the killing of sitting senators? Babe, that's unhinged. Seek help for that, Hasan. That's not normal. And for my viewers who don't follow Twitch or don't do streaming or any of that, and most people who aren't below a particular age don't actually do that, you have to understand this isn't some crazy guy. This is a massively popular, massively influential political commentator just casually popping off like this in such an unhinged way. It's a real concern. And it's not just this. It's not just this one thing where his political commentary is totally out of whack. Just minutes into this rant, he said something else that also just showed you how out of touch and insane his takes are. Take a listen to this other clip.
Why are the Democrats doing this? Don't they want to win? No, dude, they don't. Okay? They don't. They just want your fucking donations, and they want to maintain the same corporate hegemony. They want to, because they're funded by the same exact corporations that the Republicans are funded by, they want to look like they're marginally better than the Republican Party by saying, hey, we're pro this, we're pro that the Republicans are not in favor of. Hey, we don't want to kill trans people, but also we won't do anything to fucking defend trans people. And maybe we defended trans people too much. We should also kill trans people. The stand for nothing and not do anything party is still marginally better than we want to fucking kill you party, okay?
This political luminary, the Gen Z politics whisperer, who so many people on the internet actually take seriously as one of their sources for news and analysis, thinks that Democrats and Republicans are basically the same, which is in my view, very ignorant talking point. But more broadly, that the Republicans are the party that just wants to kill you. Babe, what? I don't even know how to respond to that or debunk that because it's just so weird. It's like just not true. I personally do remember surviving Trump's first presidential administration without being killed, or anyone I know being killed by the Republican Gestapo. Like, I think you hit the crack pipe a little too hard this morning, Hasan. Even on trans issues, you can disagree with Republican positions on trans issues. I think some of them are going too far. But to be very clear, nobody is trying to kill anyone. Okay, that's just not a thing. You might find some of what they're doing very objectionable and harmful even, and you could argue that, but to say they're trying to kill trans people is just disconnected from reality. Not a thing, not happening, not what anyone wants to do. And then to suggest that Democrats are basically, I don't even agree with the Democratic position on trans issues, but they're like pretty in on the pro-trans stuff. So then to suggest their position is basically kill trans people too, when that's literally no one's position. I mean, I don't know. This dude is just like disconnected with reality. Like, he's in a different planet. Him and I are not occupying the same reality. I don't know how to engage with this person, but he is one of the biggest celebrities on the internet, one of the most influential political voices among people under 25, under 30 in this country. That's disturbing. I won't hold my breath waiting on him to face any accountability or consequences from these platforms that so heavily censor people for much less severe infractions than this, but I'll call it out when I see it. And it is really toxic and harmful to be using this kind of violent rhetoric and to be just spreading such profound ignorance. And yet when you have a platform that is so incredibly big. But other than that, Hasan, you're doing amazing, I guess. What do you guys think? Are you even surprised to see this kind of unhinged ranting from Hasan Piker? Let me know in the comments. Do hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Up next, this disgraced ex-Democratic politician is trying to make a comeback, and I'm honestly lost for words at how audacious this is. Y'all might remember former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. He was governor during all the COVID fiasco, very authoritarian, kind of iron-fisted governor during all of that, but he was pretty grossly, I think, propped up and cheered on by a very slavish media, just giving him PR, and his brother was a CNN host at the time, and yet somehow no conflict of interest there. They did buddy segments together. It was a really wild time, but he ended up resigning in disgrace after several insane and really horrifying controversies brought him down as governor. Well, he's back, and he just announced a total rebrand. First of all, political rebrand, as if he's some sort of tough on crime moderate, when as governor he was pretty progressive on those same issues that he's now pivoting on. More importantly, he's back. He's running for mayor of New York City and just put out the most audacious, it's the audacity for me, message about why he is making a comeback, what values he stands on, and why he wants to be the next mayor of New York City. Take a listen to this clipped up couple of highlights from the long message he posted to X announcing his candidacy.
Hello, I'm Andrew Cuomo. We need a government with leadership that can take a stand and get things done intelligently, professionally, efficiently, effectively, and do it now. My philosophy as an elected official is simple. I work for you, not the politicians and not the special interests. I work as hard as you do, 24/7. I know what needs to be done, and I know how to do it. Experience matters. Leading New York City in the midst of a crisis is not the time or the place for on-the-job training. Did I always do everything right in my years of government service? Of course not. Would I do some things differently, knowing what I know now? Certainly. Did I make mistakes? Some painfully? Definitely. And I believe I learned from them and that I am a better person for it. And I hope to show you that every day. We believe integrity in government is essential to ensure opportunity and justice for all. My friends, we can save our city. We are New Yorkers. We are a special breed. You have to be to live in this town. We are New York tough. Knock us down and we get back up, and we are then stronger and smarter for the experience. That is who we are. I know we can turn the city around, and I believe I can help. And that is why I announced my candidacy today for mayor of New York City. I am a lifelong New Yorker, and I love New York. And I want New York to not only survive, but for New York to thrive. For my children and for yours.
Y'all, the reason I'm so taken aback by the audacity of this man is that I covered him very closely when I was working as a journalist during the COVID era. And he talks about, oh, I made a few mistakes. His bad policies resulted in potentially thousands of unnecessary deaths. And I'm going to get into all of it and explain. And then he tried to cover it up. And yet this man has just the sheer audacity to get up and talk about his strong leadership and integrity. Dude, what? I'll just take y'all on a little bit of a trip through memory lane about Andrew Cuomo's controversies when he was governor of New York during the pandemic. So he, just like a couple other states, enacted a very controversial policy at the beginning of the pandemic that forced nursing homes to accept patients who were positive for COVID-19 and prevented them from screening those patients and stopping them from coming into the nursing home or coming back into the nursing home after being in the hospital, even though elderly people, we knew very early on, were at the highest risk from COVID-19. So what that meant was that the reason this was being done, to be clear, was because they were worried about hospitals overflowing. So they wanted to make sure that hospitals could send patients back to the nursing homes, elderly people, so that hospitals wouldn't get overrun. That was a legitimate concern, though it didn't end up happening a lot. It was a legitimate concern. But this policy of forcing COVID positive patients into nursing homes, like the most vulnerable population, was a disaster for obvious reasons. It resulted in thousands of deaths of people in nursing homes potentially that may have been able to be prevented otherwise, and it just was obviously a mistake. And Cuomo basically admitted this because a couple months after it had been put in place, he took it back, but much of the damage had been done. You don't have to take my word for it. Even liberal media outlets have heavily scrutinized this policy and called it out. For example, ProPublica reported that New York's nursing homes suffered a larger percentage of deaths relative to total nursing home population than several states that did not have such a policy in place. We've heard from people who spoke out about how their family members died really cruel and terrible deaths in nursing homes and then in hospitals because they were infected, potentially as a result of this policy. Impossible to know in every single case, did it directly cause this or not? And then their family members died alone. They weren't allowed to have visitors under the COVID regime. It's really heartbreaking and terrible stuff. But you know what? I have some grace. I still think this policy was insane, but I have some grace for the fact that these leaders had to make incredibly difficult decisions on short notice with limited information. They had all these things happening at once. And I can understand that some people may have made these policies, at first at least, as kind of an honest mistake, even one that proved catastrophic. But what came afterwards was the furthest thing from honest, the absolute opposite of integrity or a man who learned from his mistakes. No, Andrew Cuomo's administration went through an extensive attempt to cover up the nursing home scandal, and then he also lied about it in front of Congress. And this all got exposed by Democratic officials. So his own side exposed him for this. As the New York Post reported at the time, the Democratic Attorney General, Letitia James, who is a progressive, pointed out that she did an investigation and found that COVID-19 deaths in New York nursing homes were 50% higher than the Cuomo administration claimed. We found out that they did this very misleading thing intentionally, where the Cuomo administration, if a person got sick in a nursing home with COVID and then went to a hospital, they didn't count it as a death in a nursing home if they died once they were at the hospital. And they intentionally did this and counted it that way to obfuscate the fact that so many deaths were happening in nursing homes. Now, Cuomo claimed in front of Congress that he was not involved in this report or any of the attempt to obfuscate data. The New York Times, not some conservative outlet, the New York Times reporting makes it clear that he lied. Emails suggest Cuomo undersold his role in altering COVID report. Earlier this summer, former Governor Andrew Cuomo squared off for a closed-door interview with 7 members of a Republican-led congressional subcommittee investigating how New York handled the early days of the coronavirus pandemic. Mr. Cuomo was asked repeatedly about a state health department report that deflected blame for the thousands of people who died of COVID in nursing homes in early 2020. Mr. Cuomo stood by the report, said he certainly did not review it, and insisted he had no memory of seeing it before its release. But a review of emails and congressional documents appears to show Mr. Cuomo not only saw the report, but personally wrote parts of early drafts. Governor's edits are attached for your review, Mr. Cuomo's assistant Farrah Kennedy wrote in an email sent to several members of the ex-governor's senior staff on June 23, 2020. They go on to explain that he was extensively involved in the drafting of this report, yet he told Congress that he had no memory of being involved with it. Sure, Andrew, sure. Now, I actually can't tell from the reporting whether he was under oath during that congressional testimony or not, because it was a closed doors thing, not a public hearing. So it's possible he wasn't under oath, but if he did testify that under oath, then he lied. And that's a crime to lie to Congress under oath. None of this is giving integrity to me. None of this is giving leadership to me. He made a massive mistake. Rather than own up to it, tried to cover it up and was exposed by his own party as having done so. All while, and get this, guys, pushing a book deal, a book about his leadership that netted him reportedly $5 million. The audacity to even show your face in public when you should honestly be in jail, and let alone show your face in public, let alone run for another office, is beyond me. And guys, we haven't even gotten to all of it. We haven't even gotten to all the tea and the lore about this man. We've only touched the surface. He also got Me Too'd very badly by a bunch of women who accused him of sexual harassment. As ABC7 reported, the Democratic Attorney General, Letitia James, issued a 168-page report, which included claims from 11 women, and concluded, "We find that the governor sexually harassed a number of current and former New York State employees by, among other things, engaging in unwelcome and non-consensual touching, as well as making numerous offensive comments of a suggestive and sexual nature that created a hostile work environment for women." So this 5-month investigation into him by his own party concluded that he sexually harassed numerous women. This was such a big scandal that he resigned from the governor's mansion. And his number 2, Kathy Hochul, became governor. She's now the governor. This is how he went out. And he's trying to make a comeback from the Believe All Women party. Again, guys, I am blown away by the audacity. But you know what? Like, he might even have a chance. He actually might have a chance. All I can say is that this man belongs in jail. He belongs in prison. Not running for office, but welcome to 2025. I guess, where hypocrisy is the norm and standards are non-existent. What do you guys think? Can you believe Andrew Cuomo's audacity? Let me know in the comments. All right, guys, now we're going to run through some quick hits, a couple headlines I want to touch on and react to quickly. Up first, the Oscars happened last night, and of course, there had to be a little bit of performative wokeness. They decided to open up the show with a land acknowledgement. Take a listen.
We gather in celebration of the Oscars on the ancestral lands of the Tongva, Tataviam, and Chumash peoples, the traditional caretakers of this water and land. We honor and pay our respects to indigenous communities here and around the world.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Give it back or shut the f*** up. Like, I cannot be the only one who finds this so incredibly obnoxious. You're gathered in your glitz and glam as celebrities and multimillionaires to celebrate yourselves and your amazing accomplishments, and yet you have to open up with this performative virtue signaling that literally helps no one, does nothing to help indigenous people or Native American people in any way. It just acknowledges the fact that the land used to belong to someone else, which, by the way, is basically true for all land anywhere. That before the very recent history, land was just taken and wars were fought and people were conquered. And is it good or moral? No, but it's the way of the world. And it's not some special thing that is only true for Native American lands. Like, try doing one of these in Europe where the borders have been rewritten so many times And also, in many cases, these native tribes warred with each other and took land from each other. It's just, the whole thing is a ridiculous mess. And it's so performative and obnoxious. It just makes me want to pull my hair out every time. I saw this funny tweet from this guy, Leo Sapir. He tweeted, kind of a mockery of this and said, "This is your land. I stole it, and I'm going to continue occupying it. But I just wanted you to know that I know it's yours. I think that will make you feel better and respect me more." It really is that dumb. And I thought they were over this. I thought they learned, but they never learn, do they? They never learn. Up next, a proposed California law would take away the right to defend your home from an intruder. Take a listen to some local news coverage.
AB 1333 was introduced last week by Assemblyman Rick Chavez-Zabur from Los Angeles. The bill seeks to eliminate certain circumstances under which homicide is justifiable, including home defense. Many law enforcement officials have come out criticizing the proposed legislation. I spoke with the Haymack County Sheriff Dave Kane to get his perspective.
We are swinging so far outside the realm of what is reasonable by telling people now that under certain circumstances they can't protect themselves in their own home against a criminal element is probably one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of.
Hey, so this is insane. This is actually wild. The fact that somebody actually thinks this is a good idea. I hope it doesn't pass. To be clear, it's just a proposal for now. But if you break into someone's home, you're a criminal, you are a burglar, and they shoot you, that's on you, babe. You played stupid games, so you won stupid prizes. You're not a victim. You haven't been assaulted. That's self-defense. Someone's home, especially when their family is upstairs and they're protecting their family, is an extension of their self. You're attacking them by breaking into their home in the middle of the night. And if you get shot, that person being brought up on murder charges or whatever this lawmaker is trying to bring about is crazy. What they're saying is, oh, well, you should have to wait until the burglar immediately threatens your life or your family's life. And then you can maybe act. But then it might be too late, dummy. It might be too late. You have to use maybe the element of surprise if they break in your house in the middle of the night. It's just crazy. As if there's some epidemic of people wrongfully killing burglars. That's not a common thing. And when it happens, again, like, FAFO, okay? Like, why is this a social problem? A lawmaker is trying to erode. Clearly, what they're telling you is very simple. They don't believe you have a right to self-defense. They are slowly chipping away at your right to own guns and use guns to defend yourself, even in your own home. And that terrifies me. And frankly, I think a lot of Americans would find it absolutely insane. Up next, a Republican congressman just floated an idea to put Donald Trump on the $100 bill. He said, "Screw you, Ben Franklin." Fox News reports a House GOP lawmaker is unveiling legislation on Monday to memorialize President Donald Trump on U.S. currency. Representative Brandon Gill, a Texas Republican, told Fox News he would be introducing a bill to put Trump's likeness on the $100 note after his current term. Sorry, but this is incredibly cringe, and we should not do this. We don't do this for living presidents, typically. It is done after they pass away, and maybe at that point, once you see how his second term plays out, by the way. We got 4 years, a long time, so kind of premature to declare it a success and want to honor him. Could be, but you kind of have to see how that plays out. And then maybe down the line, you could revisit doing something like this. But in the moment, it just gives notice me daddy vibes from some very new congressmen. And it's just cringe virtue signaling. And honestly, like, they got to stop doing this. It's okay to support Trump, to agree with a lot of his agenda, but some of these Republicans give like red hat NPC vibes. You don't have to simp this hard for him, okay? You'll survive without doing this. It is kind of an embarrassing look, if you ask me. Up next, we got another wild statement from, at this point, one of Congress's craziest members, far-left Democrat Jasmine Crockett. Take a listen to what she just said about Trump. It's actually wild.
So, unfortunately, we have someone that is occupying the White House, and as far as I'm concerned, he is an enemy to the United States. He swore an oath just like the rest of us. But right now, when you are literally putting us at risk, all because of what? Because you want to convince your followers that you should be a dictator too, that you should never leave the White House because you don't believe that elections should take place? I don't really understand what is going on, and I don't know what it's going to take to get people to wake up.
So only one part of this is true, by the way. The part where she says, I don't understand. That is clear, love. That is incredibly clear that you don't understand anything. Trump is not occupying the White House. He was elected to it. So first off, from the democracy people, the preserving democracy people, to be misleadingly framing that like that is already quite something. But then to declare Trump an enemy of the state, basically a traitor, because you disagree with how he's handling the negotiations with Zelensky and Putin, is unhinged and also irresponsible in a time when he's faced multiple assassination attempts. To be telling millions of people, diehard progressives, he's an enemy to the state. You're suggesting, I think you can guess what a few people out there, how they might interpret how they should respond to that. Now, ultimately, that's still on them, but like elected officials, left and right, do have some responsibility to think about how their words may be interpreted by extreme people out there. And this kind of rhetoric really ratchets things up. To be fair, like Trump, Republicans, they say wild stuff too, and I call them out for it. But this is not helpful. This is not remotely reasonable. It's not even really coherent. And yet Democrats are rallying around this woman, Jasmine Crockett, as if she's like their new star and they think she's just doing amazing. She is a gift that keeps on giving to Republicans because she's so extreme, so crazy, and so ill-informed. And if they really want to double down and make her the new face of their party, they better get used to losing. That's all I'll say. They better get used to that. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in and joining me. Do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go. Comment with your thoughts. I do take the time to read the comments, and I always love hearing what you guys have to say. And we will talk again real soon.